Very special speakers with us to talk to us about the SWURP internship. And I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting these people just last summer when I did the SWURP program. And feel free to come talk to me and some of the other interns after this program, and we can share our experiences with you. But first, we have Dr. Yannick, who led one of our weekly journal clubs. We discussed current issues in healthcare, and we learned how to read journal articles in the journal clubs, basically. And Dr. Yannick obtained her PhD from Yale University in biomedical studies with an emphasis on cancer molecular biology and medicinal chemistry. She's currently the Vice President of Academic Research Integration at Baylor Scott & White, as well as an Associate Professor with the College of Medicine at Texas A&M. Our other guest is Dr. Weston, who received his bachelor's degree from MIT, and then he went on to Washington University of Medicine and received his medical degree from the Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Weston is board-certified internist and an nephrologist, and he's currently the Chief Academic Officer of Baylor Scott & White, as well as the Professor of Medicine at Texas A&M Health Science Center in Temple, Texas. So you would think someone that busy wouldn't have time to meet with interns, but he took time out of his busy schedule to come meet with us and get to know us and attend our final presentations. So we're very excited to have him here today. So please welcome Dr. Weston.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and I am really appreciative that so many of you this late in the evening came out to hear about medicine and medical research. So let me begin by saying that I talked to many of my college classmates. So I graduated from college in 1974. That was way back in the Middle Ages. And so I talk to my college classmates all the time, and I am by far the happiest of all of my colleagues in terms of what I'm doing. I couldn't be happier with the career that I've chosen. Medicine, medical research in particular. I am now involved predominantly in medical administration to help our health system better carry out its research and education mission. So that makes me the Chief Academic Officer over both research and education at Baylor Scott & White. But even in that administrative role, I still find time to engage in my own personal research, which I'll talk about in a second. This is the most exciting time to enter in medicine than I think there's ever been. We are changing in ways that none of us, even 30 years ago, would have envisioned that we're changing. And we're still trying to figure out how to do the things that need to be done in the medical system, in the health system going forward. Hence, discovery and research. We're still trying to figure out how to do what we need to do. The health system in the United States is important, not just in taking care of individual patients. I think people will understand that. But we are an important part of and a vibrant part of the economy. Many of you have read that healthcare is now consuming an increasingly large part of the healthcare budget. And we're doing so in a way that cannot be sustained going forward. In other words, the increasing cost of what we do is not sustainable in the foreseeable future at its current rate. So that means then we need to figure out how to do what we do in a more efficient, in a more cost-effective way. That's research. So we often when I talk about research to my colleagues, I will substitute the word discovery, because I think research may be a bit confining, and it often has my colleagues think about something different than what I mean. So typically when I say research, they think about laboratory, test tubes, cells, mice, rats. Well, yeah, that's a big part of the research enterprise. But really, research is generation of new knowledge. And at Baylor Scott & White, we are always trying to figure out how do we do things better. So we've got the traditional research labs that many of your colleagues have joined us in that great work, and they can tell you about the experiences that they've had. But we also try to figure out what kind of treatments work best for patients, what kind of treatments have the least in the way of side effects or can be done more cheaply and get the same result. Those are kinds of things that we are doing all the time, and that's research, and it's not conducted in the traditional laboratory, but it's done in the laboratory of the health system. So when you think about research, I would encourage you to think about the word discovery, because the health system in and of itself is a laboratory overall, because we are constantly trying to figure out how to do better what we do. So I've talked about research in the laboratory, research on the wards, in the hospital wards and in the clinic, but there's also research in terms of education. How do we better teach medicine to those who will be providing this healthcare going forward? A lot of opportunities there, because there's some suspicion that the way that we are doing it currently can be improved upon. Another opportunity for research. And even in administration, which is most of my job now, even in administration, what is the best administrative structure by which to run a health system? We in American medicine basically have the same administrative setup for our health systems for about the last 50 years. But as you know, medicine has changed dramatically. What we are being asked to do by the public, the tools that we have to do it, and many other things have changed dramatically. So part of the research enterprise is actually administrative research. How do we administer the enterprise of healthcare, which includes research, which includes education, in a way that is more efficient, more effective, less costly, name your better. How do we do it better going forward? So this is an exciting time in terms of getting into the medical system, because even if you are not the traditional researcher in the laboratory, there's plenty of opportunity for research going forward. And so that makes me think about the origins of legacy Scott & White. So we're now Baylor Scott & White. I think some of you have already heard about it. Two very old organizations, both each 100 years old, have come together to form one organization, Baylor Scott & White. Legacy Scott & White were formed by Doctors Scott and White, who came to Temple, Texas in 1896. Both of them had been trained at the Mayo Clinic. They came to set up a health system to take care of the railroad workers who were at this switching station in Temple, Texas at the time. So that was the origin of Scott and White. And they came with a revolutionary idea: a multi-specialty practice. Now think about it, and that was a revolutionary idea. In those days, particularly in Texas, by the way, it was the first multi-specialty practice in Texas. In those days, physicians acted as individual practitioners, but they rarely collaborated with each other to provide comprehensive health care. So if a patient said, I'm a kidney doctor by training, if the patient came to me and said, Dr. Weston, I got some kidney problems, can you help me with them? I'll say, sure. They'll say, well, I also got heart problems, and I might say, well, I don't do hearts. Dr. Jones does hearts, and then they go see Dr. Jones, and they get their heart taken care of after having gotten their kidneys taken care of. And then they say, well, I got some lung problems too. Well, I'm a heart doctor. I don't do heart. Let's do lungs. You see my point. So in those days, one had to go to separate entities, separate individuals, separate organizations even, to get the comprehensive care. Their revolutionary idea of Dr. Scott and White was that all of the care that a patient would need would be done under one roof by one set of collaborating doctors, the so-called multi-specialty clinic. That was an experiment in and of itself. One can call it research. And they were true researchers by every measure, because they measured their outcomes from this multi-specialty clinic that they put together and compared patient outcomes to those that were occurring in traditional single solo practices. They were able to show that their outcomes were better. So they were true researchers by every measure. And so I would argue that the enterprise of healthcare is a natural laboratory for discovery, for research, because we are constantly looking at how do we do better what we do? How do we take care of patients better? Dr. Scott and White have been credited with some seminal inventions that they came up with to better care for patients. They were also instrumental in looking at ways by which they educated new physicians. In those days, the way the physicians were trained was by the apprentice model, meaning that if you wanted to learn, as I said, I'm a kidney doctor, if you wanted to learn kidney medicine, you came and hung out with me, followed me around as I took care of patients, and I would guide you as to the things that I do in the day-to-day practice of medicine. Dr. Scott and White came up with the idea of going beyond that apprenticeship model, but coming up with a specific curriculum. They didn't call it curriculum, but it was a set of things that they said that everybody coming to learn with them needed to learn. That was a revolutionary idea, and they were instrumental in starting the first residency, that is, after medical school training in Texas. Again, thinking the creation of new knowledge. So the education research was a big part of what Dr. Scott and White did then, and it continues to be a big part of what Baylor Scott and White does today. So my point is that it is hard to get away from the generation of new knowledge as you participate in a healthcare enterprise at whatever level. But the fortunate thing is that you have the opportunity to explore many different areas of healthcare delivery, particularly as being a physician. There are physicians that focus predominantly on taking care of patients. There are physicians who focus predominantly on doing research. There are some who focus predominantly on education. And there are some, like my current responsibilities, who focus predominantly on administration. There is an opportunity for pretty much whatever you want to do, depending on what your focus and what your interest is. So when I went to college with the idea that I was going to be a research biologist. I loved biology. I hung out with some of my professors in college who did research, and I was pretty excited about that. But if you remember, I said I went to college in 1970, and many of you have looked in your history books, you can remember what the college scene was in 1970. It was a pretty tumultuous time. And one of the things that was often talked about, the word that we used all the time was relevance. I want to do something that's relevant. I want to have a career that's relevant. I want to have a life that's relevant. And so I bought into that, meaning that what we do, we wanted to have some importance to making our community, our surroundings, our nation better. And so when I thought about relevance with respect to biology, it became pretty clear to me that medicine was the most direct way by which my love of biology can be translated to the direct health of individual human beings. Yes, if I were a research biologist, the discoveries that I saw myself making might have some contribution to improving things down the line, but I wanted to have it be much more direct. So that led me to wanting to become a physician. And I was sharing with one of your colleagues early on, I knew nothing about what it took to become a physician. I heard about this thing called medical school, but I didn't know very much about it. And one of the points that I'm making, and it's a pushback that I often hear about from students when I'm talking to them about medicine and telling them what it takes to go to medical school and become a physician. One of the things, the refrains I often hear is, ooh, that's a long time. Well, it wouldn't have mattered to me at the time. I had decided I was going to become a physician. And had they told me it was going to take 30 years, I wouldn't have blinked. Fortunately, it doesn't take 30 years. But my point is, that reflected my commitment to become a physician. I was going to do whatever it took to become a physician. And you've heard the years, but I would encourage you that following your passion to do what you want will give you a life well lived. I've told you how I am by far the happiest of my college classmates in doing what I do. I'm happy to go to work every day. And were I not to have a family at home, I could easily stay in my office all the time because I really enjoy what I do. But the commitments that I have with my family is the primary reason I come home. But my point is that I'm really excited about what I do. None of my colleagues that I went to college with had that kind of passion. And I think you can have that kind of passion. Don't be dissuaded by the time or the difficulties to get to where you want to go. The investment will pay off in huge returns in terms of career satisfaction. So once I got into medical school, I very much struggled with, and many of my colleagues are surprised to hear me say this since I became a kidney doctor, I struggled most with kidney physiology. That was the hardest thing for me to try to understand. And because I spent so much time trying to learn it, I got to like it. And I liked it so much, I decided that I wanted to pursue it. But I never lost my desire to do research. So I combined my taking care of patients, which I really love doing that, along with doing research. Now, that combination of doing research and taking care of patients is a common one of folks on medical school faculties. So for those of you who are interested in medicine and pursuing the research part of medicine, the common way by which you do that is by joining a medical school faculty. In that setting, you have the opportunity both to see patients and to do research. Well, you say, well, Dr. Weston, I really like doing research. I don't necessarily want to see patients. Well, you have the opportunity to do that too. But I would encourage you, though, those of you who are interested in doing research, to maintain a connection to patients, because the studies show, and my experience certainly supports, that when one has the patient perspective, that is a very good guide to what your research is going to do. You have a direct understanding of the application of your research to what you would like to see happen in the clinical world, in the hospital, in the clinic, in the clinical world. So it's called that clinical perspective. And most scientists have recognized the benefit of that, such that the better and most focused research that helps patients tends to come from those who have that clinical perspective, which means MDs who do research. So, and I've always considered myself, even when I was spending most of my time in the laboratory, a physician who did research and not a researcher who happened to be a physician. So, for example, our laboratory has looked at issues of what we call acid-based physiology. That is, how the kidney removes acid in the blood that comes from the things that we eat, gets rid of it from the blood so that our blood stays healthy, and puts it into the urine. So our lab has done that for 30 years and looking mostly using a rat model. Well, our idea about research is not to cure kidney disease in rats. Our idea is to try to cure kidney disease in people. So we have worked for many years to do what we call translational research. That is, translate the findings that we are seeing in the laboratory setting into the care of patients. And to make a long story short, we've been successful in doing that. And some of our insights in laboratory rats have led us to ways by which we think we can prevent kidney disease using dietary interventions. I was sharing with one of your colleagues early on that some of our research in rats supports, and some of our patient studies also support, that making specific changes in the diet can be kidney protective. And for us, we've been working on this now for 33 years, and for us, this is pretty exciting to be able to make that translation from animal studies to patient studies, again, with that perspective of looking at the research that was being done in animals with a view toward how can we improve patient-related diseases, patient-related health struggles. And so those studies are ongoing now to see whether the hypothesis that we've developed, that is making these specific dietary changes, will help protect kidneys from getting worse, whether or not that is really true. And so it's an example then of the type of research that is necessary to make our health system better. So you might say, all right, well, you help make kidney disease better. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is it's a fairly common disease that causes a lot of morbidity, meaning reduction in both the quality and quantity of life, and it also makes these patients die an early death. But if you're an economist, and you're an economist in mind, this is a very expensive disease to treat. So think about being able to prevent kidney disease, spare spending of healthcare dollars, and now you are contributing not just as a scientist and as a physician, you're also contributing to the betterment of the economy overall. So that's getting to what I've said before. Healthcare is at the center of the revolution that's going on in this country, and that fixing the healthcare system is something that needs to be done. And the small scientific explorations that we've been doing have the propensity not only to improve our scientific knowledge, not only to improve the care of patients, but also to make a significant contribution to much more efficient, effective, but less costly healthcare. Hence the power of research. So I've just told you my own particular story. Many of my colleagues can share very similar stories in different areas. So research is an important part of what all of our scientists, of all of our providers will participate in, even if they don't consider themselves to be scientists. They are scientists indeed, because they're simply generating new knowledge. It's generated in the laboratory for sure, but also in the classroom. It is generated in the hospital wards and the hospital clinics, because we are constantly having to figure out how to do things better. And so finally, when we talk about the education of our trainees to become providers, physicians, nurses, other healthcare providers, research is becoming an increasing part of the training. So for instance, our graduate medical education program, that is the in-hospital, in-clinic training that occurs after medical school, postgraduate education. The national oversight body requires that those individuals engage in research. And so some residents will say, you know, Dr. Weston, I don't want to do this research thing. All I want to do is to take care of patients. Why are you guys making me do this research? Well, my response is that research has value not just in the generation of knowledge, but also in honing your thinking as to how you take care of a problem that is before you. So, for example, in the laboratory, when we come up with a scientific problem, we identify the problem. We then do some background work to try to identify all of the information that has been gathered about that problem before. We then establish a set of hypotheses to determine why the phenomenon that we've identified is happening. And we test those hypotheses to rule them in or rule them out. Straight up scientific thinking. However, clinicians do exactly the same thing. They just use different language. So when a patient comes in with an unidentified problem, that is, they've got a problem, but we don't know what the reason is, we will do some initial investigation, gathering a history, doing a physical exam, doing some preliminary work, and then we will develop what we call a differential diagnosis, a number of diseases that we think might be responsible for the patient's problem. That's just generating some hypotheses. And then we set about testing those differential diagnoses to rule them in or rule them out. It's the same process. And so my argument is that engaging in the research process, even if you do not intend to include research in your career in medicine, helps you in your career of medicine overall. And I can tell you, and Hanya can also tell you too, there are many individuals who came with the attitude I just described. Oh, I don't want to do this research thing. But they get into it and say, hey, this is kind of fun. It really is fun for me, and it generates the excitement, and it helps us all want to come to work every day. I would ask you to talk with some of the SWURP graduates who have participated in the research program in dealing with our investigators at Baylor Scott and White, who have invited them into their labs and give them a peek into the kind of work that they do, and to see not only the value of the research, but how much fun it is to engage in it. So let me stop here and say, medicine is the career. You'll have more fun doing that, I would say, than doing anything else. Research adds a nice spice to the medical career. Not only that it's a benefit for our society, but it's a blast for us. And the health system will be very appreciative of your efforts, because what you will contribute, not just in terms of delivery of care, but in terms of generation of new knowledge, will be of immeasurable importance, and you'll have a great time doing it. So let me stop here. In the few minutes that I have, I certainly would like the opportunity to answer some questions about some of the things that I've talked about. Yes, sir. The question is, what are my thoughts about socialized type of medicine? A socialized type of healthcare system. I'm not so bent on the structure of what the health system looks like. I've got my own biases about it, but I want a system that takes care of everybody at the highest quality. And if we can agree on that, then there are a lot of options by which we can get there. And the so-called socialized system that many European and South American countries have demonstrated some positive aspects toward that, of being able to take care of everybody and to do so at high quality. there are problems with each one of these systems, but I would start with the premise that our healthcare system is going to provide healthcare for everybody, is going to provide it at high quality, and we're going to do it in a way that fits our fiscal constraints. If the social system works, let's run with it. If you got something different that can accomplish those three goals, let's talk about it. Other questions? Yes. The question is, have I seen the efficiency of healthcare get in the way of quality of healthcare? There is the potential for that to happen. And so for our barometer, certainly my personal one, but that it's the barometer that we have at Baylor Scott & White, the first and most important thing is the quality. You don't want to compromise the quality. So beginning with the quality is we would then work backwards to see how can we achieve the quality at the highest cost, at the lowest cost to do it most efficiently. So yeah, that is a possibility. It certainly can happen. And we've faced that danger in our own health system, and other health systems have done that. But my premise is quality is first. Then we work backwards from there. Good question. Other questions? Yes, sir. Yes. Great question. So, new ways of teaching healthcare providers to become first-class healthcare providers. So, just like with the care of patients quality being job one, the quality of our training is going to be job one. So just about everything we do in medicine is quite expensive, including the education enterprise. So we don't want to get into doing the education in the cheapest way. We want to do it at the highest quality, and then look at ways by which we can do it more cheaply. So, there's a lot of things that we can talk about, but one thing that's top of mind now is simulation technology. So when I came along, particularly during our residency, the way that I learned how to do procedures was working with patients in doing procedures. And so more experienced physicians would show me how to do procedures working on patients. And so it was a very gradual thing. So I would watch a whole bunch, and if there were, let's say, 10 steps in a complicated procedure, the faculty physician would let me do maybe the first 2 steps, then he or she would do the next 8. Then the next time I might do the first 4, and so on until I got the proficiency to do the procedure. We now, using simulation technology, can shorten that training time by using simulated patients that are actual mannequins, if you will, sometimes even on the computer, where I can get the dexterity of doing these procedures in a way that actually makes me much more proficient in a shorter period of time than I did when I was learning on patients. So simulation technology is expensive. Hanya and I talk about the expense of these mannequins that we have to purchase all the time. But if you look at the healthcare system as a whole, although our education costs may go up, patient complications, though, go down as we're using that simulation technology. So it is an example of an area where we may be more expensive on this end of the ledger, but by reducing patient complications and the quality of care that is delivered, we're actually reducing costs overall. So simulation technology is but one example of the way by which we're teaching different, and I would argue better, in medicine. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts on current improvements in technology impeding like the teaching of practice? Like instead of listening to a heartbeat, with a stethoscope and determining what ailments are affecting the patient using just like machines to do that for you.
That's a very good question. And the question, if I've got it correctly, is the potential for the technology that we have now to get in the way of effective teaching. So the example that you talked about, the listening to the heart, is actually a very good one. So when I came along, we were taught to be experts at using the stethoscope. And so all the subtleties of what you hear and don't hear, we use that to try to get as close to the diagnosis as we could to match that what we heard with the patient's complaint. As things have gone along, we're using more and more technology to not just listen, but to look in. And so ultrasound technology, for instance, using sound waves to make a picture of what's going on, in this case, the heart, as opposed to simply listening with the stethoscope. Well, it turns out that the pictures give us more valuable information, but sometimes more information than we need in order to address the question at hand. Let me leave it at that. It would take a while to explain that. But many times we have one question, one issue that we're trying to address, and we want one piece of data. The ultrasound may give us a whole bunch of data that will lead us off in the directions that at least at that moment we don't know. So all of that to say is that we're now coming full circle to thinking that the most efficient way is to continue to train our physicians to be very good in listening with the stethoscope, because we can avoid the expense of the ultrasound and the extra tests and things that might come from the ultrasound giving us information that we don't need, and the patients do just as well. So if we can come up with ways by which patients do just as well with their complaints, we can do so more safely for them and, importantly, more cheaply, then we would go with the cheaper technology. And that's kind of where medicine is going back to the stethoscope, so we're going back to the future. One more question. Yes, sir.
How do you think the healthcare system works on after wait time for the is it certain there is some, where there's issues that they want to go to doctor's appointment, so how do you think the healthcare system?
Oh, that's a great question. The healthcare system dealing with wait time. We are struggling with that at Baylor Scott and White every day. And in fact, I'll tell you a secret. Don't tell anybody. But in the old days, before we came to be Baylor Scott and White, we were Legacy Scott and White, the S&W. And one of the knocks that our enemies' health systems would say to us, it's not really Scott and White, it's called sit and wait. Because it took such a long time to get in to see us. To make a long story short, we're making progress in that, in making our operations more efficient to get patients in and out. And one of the ways by which we're doing it is changing the way that we deliver health care. In short, recognizing that not everybody who interfaces with the health system needs to see a physician. And so we are using nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and other advanced practice professionals who we can hire a whole lot more of, particularly to do the what we call the frontline medicine. And so if we can expand the cadre of providers, then we can increase the access that our patients have. A lot of other operational changes that we're making, but that's one. And so that's one way by which we're addressing the sit and wait problem. So thank you very much for your attention. You've been great, and look forward hopefully to working with all of you in the future.
Will that get in the way? It should be okay. All right. I'm just waiting on getting the microphone. Did he turn it on? Is it on? I can't tell if it's on.
Testing.
It's on. Can you stick it in there for me? I just think I have too many of these things everywhere. So let's stick it. There. Can y'all hear me okay? Yes? Everybody in the back can hear me okay? Thank you. So good evening. Thank you, Dr. Wesson, for a wonderful presentation highlighting the benefits of medical research. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about SWURP specifically, but by a show of hands, I'm curious in the room tonight, how many of you have been involved in research in some capacity before? Okay, quite a few of you. That's wonderful. So I'm a biomedical scientist by training. As you heard, I graduated from Baylor in 2005 with my PhD. I don't get to do a lot of what I did back then now, but I'm very passionate about what I do, very similar to Dr. Wesson. I wake up every day and enjoy my job so much because I get to inspire others in research using a variety of different techniques, whether it's education programs, projects, mentoring, working with faculty, working with medical students and residents and nurses and a variety of different research teams. So to reflect on what Dr. Wesson said, it's a privilege to be able to do what we do on a daily basis. And we're very pleased to be able to extend that to our Baylor University partners as well. So I want to talk a little bit about SWURP. We're moving into the third cohort, the third group of students that will be joining us this summer. And what I'm going to share with you probably doesn't give the best impression as if you talk to the students that have participated in the program in the past. Their feedback and their input and their experiences, I think, are going to give you a lot more details as to what the experience was really like. Probably some pluses and maybe some opportunities for us because we're still working on a few things. But overall, I think if you can talk to the students that have graduated from the program, you'll really benefit from getting some insight as to the value of the program. So the program itself is 10 weeks, 10 weeks long, and this summer we'll be accepting about 15 students into the program. I think this is the largest group that we've accepted in the term of this program. The program is overseen by Dr. Sanker and I. We coordinate the program, but the students during the program are supervised by pretty much two individuals. They're paired up with a clinical research coordinator, and a clinical research coordinator is an individual that coordinates clinical research trial projects at an institution where there's clinical research activity. Okay, so you'll be paired up with a clinical research coordinator and a principal investigator, a scientist, could be a clinician scientist, a physician, or a PhD bench scientist that might be doing translational type of work as well. So you'll be supervised by two individuals during the course of that program. At the end of the summer, you will also have the opportunity to extend that program into a one-year experience through the following May. So your 10-week experience could be a year long, and you're going to experience working with a clinical research coordinator and an investigator. And I'm going to talk about the differences in working with the two different mentors here shortly. So why SWURP? Why is it important that we have this program? What's the advantages to the program? Well, obviously, it helps us to foster some skills in medical research and provide some experience in both basic and clinical research. It also complements our Scott and White medical research faculty and the Baylor undergraduates. So what's nice about this program is that we're going to pair your interests as well to the best of our abilities. So if you have an interest in oncology, we're going to try to pair you up with an oncology researcher. If you have an interest in traumatic brain injury, we're going to pair you up with someone maybe in neurology or neurosurgery or trauma. Okay. And this collaborative program really helps us integrate our research collaborations between the institutions. And it's an example by which we can partner an academic institution with a healthcare system as well. In addition to that, the experience will enhance your careers in medicine and overall improve healthcare, as we heard from Dr. Wesson's presentation and talk, really of the value of research in medicine. I'm curious from the SWURP students that are here tonight, what other ways have you benefited from SWURP? Anybody want to share just maybe one or two thoughts? I'll repeat her.
I
Okay.
think one of the main benefits that I had was just the mentorship, and it
Okay.
really kind of directed the research interests that I have and I'm pursuing now,
Okay, so mentorship.
providing me with some excellent contacts to provide advice and
Okay.
letters in the future.
So mentorship, some research advice, and kind of guiding you in your career now. Okay, that's great. So anybody else? Any other thoughts?
I would just say it really helped me understand what it's like to be at an academic, medical facility. So that was really, very informative, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere.
Okay, so the setting helped you really acclimate to what an academic medical center might be like, or being in a hospital. Now, Cammie worked with Dr. Hofkamp, who's one of our anesthesiologists, and you did simulation research as well, right? So similar to what Dr. Wesson talked about, Cammie was involved in doing some simulation research with some of the residents and medical students, I believe, correct? Okay. Any other thoughts from anybody else? Okay, so a lot of different benefits that you're going to get out of participating in this program. It's going to provide some great enhancement to a career in medicine, learning some of the skills, developing that mentor-mentee relationship. I can tell you a lot of our SWURP students are still in contact with their mentors. Some of them review their personal statements for them for their medical school applications. They've practiced interviewing with them. They've practiced a variety of different skills with them, and in helping them advance their careers as well, and giving them guidance. But in addition to that, specifically learning about clinical research as well. So there's opportunities to really understand the process of clinical research and the value of clinical research as it pertains to medicine. A lot of networking opportunities, getting to interact with the healthcare system, with different providers, with different coordinators, with different physicians as well. I know some of our students have participated in other research meetings while they were on our campus as well. So this is just a small sampling of the different benefits of participating in the SWURP program, or any type of research development training program that you might be interested in. So just to kind of highlight the timeline for this program and some things to expect, we opened up the application process in December, and Erin's going to correct me if any of this is wrong. The deadline for applications is at the end of the month, at the end of this week, in fact. Those applications will be reviewed in February and interviews scheduled, and I believe those interviews are conducted by the pre-health office. And then in March, those candidates will be selected and notified. Beginning in March, because the students that are involved in research on our campus are involved in clinical research, basic research, potentially even animal research, all the students go through the same training. Okay, and there are a lot of regulatory requirements for research training, depending on the type of training that you're going to be involved in. But we require that all students complete all of the training so that you have an understanding of all different types of research. Whether you're doing bench research, you'll understand the biosafety hazards and the issues behind biosafety research. If you're doing animal research, you'll learn about how to handle animals and safety practices working with animals. If you're doing clinical research, you'll also learn about human subject protection and the importance of protecting humans and patients in human research. So that takes quite a bit of time, but we try to have that incorporated before you are on campus in June, so that as soon as you join us in June, you hit the road running and you're involved in your research activities. Okay, so we try to get that completed ahead of time. The internship ends in August, and we have a very nice event where all the students give about a 10-minute presentation on their research activity and what they learned during their internship. And then in September, which is optional, the full one-year program can begin. What we try to incorporate in SWURP as part of the learning objectives is that you understand and get experience in research from the very beginning to the very end of the process. So even if you join a project that might be in the middle of the research process, we're still going to teach you how to begin a research process. Okay, so throughout the curriculum, we try to embed the research process from designing a research idea and a research question to how to do a literature review. You will get to go to our medical library and work with our librarians on searching the medical literature. And then Dr. Wendy Hegefeld is the primary coordinator for this program in our office, and she will help you in research design and development. She does a lot of protocol development at our institution. You'll learn the regulatory requirements. You'll also get to work with biostatisticians and how data is collected. You'll also get access to our electronic medical records if you're doing a clinical research, and you'll learn how to pull data from electronic medical records for the studies that you're on. And then you'll also learn how to disseminate those findings in the form of a type of scholarly product, whether it's an abstract or a manuscript or a poster or even a presentation. Okay, so you'll get to experience and learn all of those different skills. One of the features of the SWURP program is that every Friday we have a weekly research meeting, and those research topics that we cover during that session may include some of the content that we talked about in the research process. It could be about the library, it could be about academic writing. We even talk about quality improvement research as well. But what we also incorporate is an evidence-based medicine journal club. We have about 4 physicians that volunteer to review a journal article with the students during those journal clubs. And so you'll receive an article, and we'll teach you how to review an article and how to break down the skeleton of a manuscript and understand it, interpret it. And then the physician during that journal club will walk you through it as well. So we teach you the basics, and then we'll give you some different articles that are specific to a certain area. So we've had traumatic brain injury research before, we've had some cancer research before, some neurology research as well. And I think from what I heard from former graduates tonight was this was one of the most important and beneficial aspects of the SWURP program, was actually learning how to break down the skeleton of a manuscript, utilize that, interpret it, and use it for understanding research moving forward. So one of the I think most significant aspects of it. And then you also get to interact with the clinician scientists and really get some additional input from them on what it takes to do research in our setting. So at the end of SWURP, what do we expect back from the students? Well, we do ask that they write a white paper, which gets turned into Dr. Sanker and Aaron. And then you'll also present a 10-minute project talk on what you learned during your experience. It's actually a very fun event. You get to practice it ahead of time, so no pressure before the day of. And then you might also have some type of scholarly product that your mentor deems appropriate for your experience. And I'm going to share with you some different scholarly products that some of our graduates have produced as a result of this program. So GAMI is graduated from the summer cohort of 2013, and I just kind of want to show you some of the different posters, abstracts that she produced as a result of her work. All of this, by the way, gets to go on her resume and on her CV for medical school applications, really strengthening her application, not just because it adds stuff to her application, but it demonstrates her interest and her skills in research, a huge plus if you're going into medical school. One of the interesting things about GAMI is that she was also awarded a $2,000 scholarship to travel to San Francisco, I believe it was, at the time, for a conference where she had an abstract that was accepted. And she got a 1-year membership to the Society for Simulation in Healthcare. And that was under the mentorship of Dr. Hofkamp. So that's one example of some of the things that you could potentially expect as a product of working in this program. Some different examples from some of our other students, poster presentations, a couple of manuscripts. Wow, to graduate out of this program and have a peer-reviewed manuscript in the literature with your name on it, that's huge. I think that we have residents even right now that are struggling to get a few publications before they graduate. So as an undergraduate, that's a huge, significant outcome for participating in this program. So just some other examples. Dean Leonard, in fact, was hired on part-time the summer after his experience as well, and got to do some part-time work with his lab after his experience. So Dean also has several publications and manuscripts that were produced from participating in SWURP. A couple more, and there's some from CAMI as well. So as you can see, there are quite a few scholarly products that were resulting from the students' participation in SWURP. So we look forward to year 3, and we hope that all of you are interested in participating in SWURP. And we look forward to you learning, growing, and understanding and applying research in medicine as you pursue your career in medicine as well. So I'm going to end there and have a few minutes for questions and answers specifically to SWURP or any other questions that maybe myself or Dr. Wesson could address. Any questions? Okay, I think I'm supposed to turn it over to Peter.
All right, let's give another warm